Major Jasmine Washington's fingers trembled as she pressed her phone against her ear, the hushed cabin suddenly silent as every passenger stared at her. General Brooks? They physically pushed me. Twice. Called me things. Threatened to have me arrested for sitting in first class, even after seeing my uniform and ticket. The flight attendant who'd assaulted her now stood frozen in the aisle, face draining of color as Jasmine nodded. Yes, sir, I understand. She looked up, a steel resolve replacing her tears. The plane is officially grounded. Would this brave soldier's stand against discrimination cost her everything she'd worked for? Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up for justice, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more powerful stories of courage against discrimination. Just 40 minutes earlier, Major Jasmine Washington had arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with a light spring in her step. Today was supposed to mark the pinnacle of her 12 years of dedicated military service. Her perfectly pressed Army dress uniform gleamed under the fluorescent lights as she made her way to the check-in counter, the golden insignia of her rank catching occasional glimmers as she moved. Fellow travelers glanced respectfully at the impressive array of medals adorning her chest, though most couldn't recognize the valor they represented. Jasmine checked her watch, ensuring she would arrive in Washington, D.C. with ample time to prepare for tomorrow's special Pentagon ceremony. The Distinguished Service Medal awaited her, an honor bestowed for her extraordinary courage during a surprise ambush in Afghanistan 2 years ago. When her unit had been surrounded by enemy fire, she'd coordinated an evacuation that saved 18 soldiers, risking her own life repeatedly to ensure no one was left behind. The memory still gave her nightmares, but tomorrow's recognition would help bring closure to those difficult moments. Good morning, ma'am. Jasmine greeted the ticket agent with the warm smile that had become her trademark among fellow officers. I have a first-class ticket to Washington. The agent processed her boarding pass efficiently, offering genuine congratulations when Jasmine mentioned the purpose of her trip. This positive interaction only heightened her optimism for the day ahead. She breezed through security, her military ID expediting the process, and arrived at her gate with time to spare. Several passengers nodded respectfully at her uniform, and an elderly man wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap gave her a solemn salute that Jasmine returned with equal respect. When boarding began, Jasmine stood patiently in the priority line with other first-class passengers, mostly white businessmen in expensive suits typing furiously on their phones. The gate agent welcomed her warmly, scanning her ticket with an appreciative nod toward her medals. Thank you for your service, Major. Have a pleasant flight. Stepping onto the plane, Jasmine immediately noticed flight attendant Miranda Evans, a slender woman in her late 40s with carefully highlighted blonde hair and a practiced smile. Miranda greeted each first-class passenger with enthusiastic warmth, directing them to their seats with flourishing gestures and offering immediate beverage service. Good morning, Miranda chirped to the gray-haired executive in front of Jasmine. Welcome aboard, Mr. Peterson. Your usual seat by the window, and I'll have your scotch ready before takeoff. When Jasmine stepped forward, Miranda's smile flickered, almost imperceptibly. The warmth in her eyes cooled as her gaze swept over Jasmine's dark skin, then her uniform, then back to her face. Ticket? Miranda asked flatly, extending her hand without the friendliness she'd shown previous passengers. Jasmine handed over her boarding pass. Good morning. I'm in 3A. Miranda examined the ticket with unusual scrutiny, turning it over as if expecting to find something wrong. First class is just for today's flight, she said in a tone that suggested Jasmine might not understand this concept. Yes, I'm aware, Jasmine replied politely, maintaining her professional composure despite the obvious shift in treatment. She'd encountered such microaggressions before and had learned that dignified restraint often worked best. Miranda reluctantly stepped aside, but as Jasmine moved past, she felt the flight attendant's eyes following her with suspicion. Jasmine stowed her small carry-on efficiently and settled into her window seat, focusing on her upcoming presentation rather than the uncomfortable encounter. As other passengers boarded, Jasmine noticed Miranda repeatedly glancing in her direction while whispering to another flight attendant. 10 minutes later, as Miranda distributed complimentary headphones to first-class passengers, she skipped Jasmine entirely. When Jasmine politely raised her hand to request a pair, Miranda's response was immediate and loud. "Those are for first-class passengers only," she announced, her voice carrying enough that nearby passengers looked up from their magazines and devices. "I understand," Jasmine replied calmly. "I am in first class, seat 3A, as my ticket shows." Miranda's eyebrows arched dramatically. "Are you sure you're in the right section? Let me see your boarding pass again." The businessman beside Jasmine shifted uncomfortably as she once again produced her ticket. Other passengers began watching. The interaction, their expressions ranging from confusion to discomfort, to, in some cases, thinly veiled amusement. "This must be a mistake," Miranda insisted, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "Let me check with the gate." "There's no mistake," Jasmine countered firmly, but professionally. "I booked this seat specifically for my trip to Washington, D.C. I'm scheduled to receive a military honor tomorrow." Miranda's lips tightened as she grudgingly handed back the boarding pass. "Well, it appears to be correct, though these systems make errors sometimes." She walked away without providing the headphones Jasmine had requested. Throughout the boarding process, Jasmine noticed Miranda's solicitous attention to every other first-class passenger. When the middle-aged white businessman in 3B beside her requested an extra pillow, Miranda practically tripped over herself to accommodate him, leaning across Jasmine without acknowledgement as if she were invisible. "Excuse me," Jasmine said. Finally, when Miranda passed by with a tray of pre-departure beverages, offering them to everyone but her. "I'll be with you in a moment," Miranda replied without looking at her, continuing to serve others. 10 minutes passed, and the beverage cart disappeared with Jasmine still waiting. The businessman beside her sipped his complimentary champagne, occasionally glancing at her with what seemed like growing discomfort. When Miranda returned to help a passenger stow luggage, she deliberately turned her back to Jasmine, then took a step backward, bumping forcefully into Jasmine's shoulder. "Oh!" Miranda exclaimed, spinning around with exaggerated surprise. "You need to be careful about blocking the aisle." Jasmine, who hadn't moved and was fully in her seat, felt a flush of indignation but maintained her composure. "Ma'am, I'm completely in my seat. You backed into me." "I don't think so," Miranda responded coldly. Perhaps military personnel are used to taking up more space than is appropriate in civilian settings. The comment stung, but Jasmine simply asked, "May I please have a water before takeoff?" "We're very busy right now preparing for departure," Miranda replied. "Economy service will begin once we're airborne." "I'm not in economy," Jasmine stated firmly, her patience wearing thin. "I'm in first class, as my ticket shows, and as you've already verified. I would appreciate being treated with the same respect as other passengers in this section." Miranda's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" Before Jasmine could respond, Miranda deliberately stepped backward again, this time stumbling against Jasmine's knee with enough force that it couldn't possibly be accidental. "You just pushed me," Miranda declared loudly. "Did everyone see that? This passenger just pushed me." The cabin fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her military training helping her maintain outward calm despite her racing heart. "That's absolutely untrue," Jasmine stated clearly. "You backed into me deliberately, twice now." "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," Miranda hissed. "You're disturbing other passengers." "I'm speaking at a normal volume," Jasmine replied calmly. "And I'm requesting fair treatment." Miranda leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Jasmine could hear. "Listen, you people need to learn your place. I don't care what uniform you're wearing or what ticket someone mistakenly gave you. I know you don't belong here, and I can have security remove you from this plane with one call." The blatant racism of the comment left Jasmine momentarily speechless. In her years of service across 3 continents, she'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so overt and never while in full uniform. "What seems to be the problem here?" A new flight attendant approached, looking concerned. "This passenger is being disruptive," Miranda stated before Jasmine could speak. "She pushed me twice and is refusing to follow crew instructions. I believe she may also be in the wrong seat." Jasmine took a deep breath, then reached for her Phone. I need to make a call to my commanding officer. Phones must be in airplane mode now, Miranda snapped. Put that away immediately or I'll call security. The door isn't closed yet, and we haven't been instructed to enable airplane mode, Jasmine corrected her, dialing the number with steady fingers despite her racing heart. And I suggest you reconsider your approach. Discrimination against active-duty military personnel is taken very seriously. As Miranda's face contorted with anger, Jasmine connected with General Brooks, her direct superior and longtime mentor. When she explained the situation, his response was immediate and unequivocal. And that's when Jasmine looked up at the now pale flight attendant and uttered the words that would change everything. The plane is officially grounded. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I regret to inform you that we are experiencing a delay. Please remain seated while we sort out some administrative issues. We hope to be on our way shortly. The vague announcement triggered immediate groans throughout the cabin. Business travelers checked watches anxiously, while vacation-bound passengers exchanged worried glances. No one yet understood that the administrative issue involved discrimination against a decorated military officer. Miranda's confident demeanor had vanished. Her face now displayed a mixture of disbelief and mounting panic as she hurried toward the front of the plane, whispering urgently to the lead flight attendant. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat perfectly still, phone clutched in her hand, maintaining the composed dignity that had carried her through combat zones and Pentagon briefings alike. "What's happening?" asked the businessman in 3B, who had witnessed the entire confrontation. "Did you really get the flight grounded?" "This isn't about delaying anyone's travel," Jasmine explained quietly. "It's about addressing a serious incident of discrimination." Within minutes, the cabin door reopened, and a heavy-set man in his mid-50s strode aboard, his airline supervisor badge prominently displayed. Craig Palmer scanned the first-class cabin with narrowed eyes until Miranda pointed directly at Jasmine. "Major Washington?" His tone carried artificial politeness, stretched thin over obvious irritation. "I'm Craig Palmer, customer service supervisor. I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Jasmine met his gaze steadily. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Palmer. I was physically pushed by your flight attendant, subjected to discriminatory comments, and denied the same service provided to other first-class passengers." Craig's practiced smile didn't reach his eyes. "These situations often involve perspective issues, Major. I'm sure Miranda didn't intend any offense." "I've requested the security footage," Jasmine informed him. "My commanding officer has already filed a formal complaint with your airline's corporate headquarters." Craig's smile faltered. "Unfortunately, the cameras in this section are undergoing maintenance today. No footage is available." How convenient, Jasmine thought. "There are dozens of witnesses," she pointed out, gesturing to the surrounding passengers. "I saw everything," the businessman beside her unexpectedly interjected. Tyler Freeman adjusted his expensive tie as he leaned forward. "And frankly, the Major is being generous in her description. What I witnessed was blatant discrimination." Craig's expression hardened. "Sir, with all due respect, we're handling this matter." "By claiming conveniently missing security footage?" Tyler countered skeptically. Miranda stepped forward, her professional mask back in place. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I was simply explaining our boarding procedures when the Major became agitated." "That's categorically false," Jasmine stated firmly. "You deliberately pushed me twice and made discriminatory comments." The standoff continued as Craig suggested they discuss this privately, clearly hoping to remove Jasmine from the plane without further incident. When she refused, citing safety concerns about leaving her assigned seat during an active discrimination investigation, his cordial facade began cracking. "Major Washington," Craig said, lowering his voice, "I'm trying to resolve this efficiently. The simplest solution would be for you to voluntarily take the next flight to Washington. We'd be happy to upgrade you to first class." "I'm already in first class," Jasmine replied evenly, "and I have no intention of allowing this incident to be brushed aside." What Craig and Miranda didn't realize was that their attempts at damage control were already failing spectacularly. A young woman 3 rows back had been recording the confrontation on her phone since Craig boarded. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were circulating on social media with the rapidly spreading hashtag, "Respect our troops." "This is ridiculous," Craig finally declared, his patience visibly exhausted. "We need to get this plane in the air. Major, I'm asking you one last time to cooperate." "I am cooperating," Jasmine responded calmly. "I'm remaining in my assigned seat and requesting equal treatment under federal aviation regulations and military personnel protections." As the standoff continued, another airline representative hurried aboard, whispering urgently to Craig. His expression shifted as he received what was clearly unwelcome news. "It appears there's been..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "An escalation of this matter. Our corporate office has been contacted by military authorities." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Jasmine's face, but it disappeared instantly when Miranda, who had been standing nearby, muttered something under her breath that contained unmistakably racial language. The slur was quiet, but audible enough that several nearby passengers gasped. "What did you just say?" Tyler demanded, his previous ambivalence completely gone. Miranda's eyes widened with feigned innocence. "I didn't say anything inappropriate. This is getting completely out of hand. Have you ever witnessed discrimination firsthand and felt powerless to stop it? Comment number 1 if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of their race or uniform. Hit that like button if you admire Major Washington's composure in the face of such blatant disrespect. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage against discrimination. Do you think the airline will actually hold Miranda accountable, or will they try to sweep this under the rug? Let's find out what happens next in this shocking true story. "Excuse me, I need to come through." The commanding voice cut through the tense atmosphere like a bugle at dawn. Heads turned as an elderly white man with ramrod-straight posture made his way determinedly from economy toward the first-class cabin. Despite his age, evident in the deep lines etching his face and his snow-white hair, he moved with military precision. "Sir, you need to return to your seat," Craig instructed firmly. "We're handling a situation here." The man drew himself up, to his full height, which still commanded respect despite the slight stoop of age. "I am Colonel James Whitaker, United States Army, retired, and I witnessed everything on my way to the lavatory." His weathered finger pointed directly at Miranda. "That woman deliberately shoved this officer, twice. I recognize the distinguished Flying Cross and Bronze Star on Major Washington's uniform. She's a decorated combat veteran, and I will not sit by while she's disrespected." The unexpected appearance of Colonel Whitaker shifted the cabin's energy. Several passengers who had been silently watching now began openly questioning the airline staff's handling of the situation. "Why is this taking so long?" demanded a woman in the second row. "Is it true she was pushed?" asked another passenger, standing to get a better view. Craig raised his hands placatingly. "Everyone, please remain in your assigned seats. We're working to resolve this as quickly as possible." "By covering it up, you mean?" Colonel Whitaker challenged. "I fought in Vietnam, son. I know discrimination when I see it." The solidarity from a white veteran carried weight that even Craig couldn't easily dismiss. More passengers began voicing support for Jasmine, creating a chorus of discontent that airline personnel struggled to contain. As the delay extended past the hour mark, the captain made another announcement about ongoing administrative issues, triggering a wave of groans from passengers increasingly concerned about missed connections. Jasmine sat quietly, the eye of this growing storm. She reflected on her childhood in Baltimore, where her father, a postal worker, had instilled in her an unwavering belief in service and integrity. "America isn't perfect, Jazzy," he'd told her when she first mentioned joining the military at 16. "But serving her is how we make her better." Despite discouragement from teachers who suggested more realistic career paths for a black girl from her neighborhood, she'd pursued her dream with singular focus, earning a ROTC scholarship that opened the door to her military career. Now, that same determination kept her centered as chaos swirled around her. She wouldn't back down, not just for herself, but for every service member who might face similar treatment. Tyler Freeman, The businessman beside her, who had initially wavered in his support, now openly advocated for her, challenging Craig's evasive responses with increasing frustration. "This is completely unacceptable," Tyler declared. "I fly your airline weekly, and I've never seen such blatant mishandling of a situation." Miranda, increasingly desperate to regain control, retreated briefly to the galley before returning with a stern-faced airport security officer. "That's her," Miranda said immediately, pointing at Jasmine. "She's the one causing the disturbance." The security officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, approached with obvious preconceptions. "Ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings and come with me." "On what grounds?" Jasmine asked calmly, though her heart raced. "Causing a disturbance and interfering with flight crew duties," he replied automatically, his gaze barely acknowledging her uniform or rank. Before Jasmine could respond, Colonel Whitaker stepped forward with surprising agility for his 72 years. "Officer, you're about to make a career-defining mistake. This woman is Major Jasmine Washington, scheduled to receive the Distinguished Service Medal at the Pentagon tomorrow. I suggest you verify the actual situation before removing a decorated officer based on discriminatory allegations." The security officer hesitated, finally taking a proper look at Jasmine's uniform and the impressive array of medals it displayed. His hand, which had been resting on his radio, slowly dropped to his side. "Perhaps I should speak with the captain directly," he said, his certainty visibly wavering. "An excellent suggestion," Colonel Whitaker agreed firmly. As the security officer retreated to the cockpit for consultation, Jasmine caught Tyler studying her medals with newfound respect. "Afghanistan?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "2 tours. Iraq as well." "My brother was in Kandahar," Tyler said. "He always told me how critical good officers were to keeping everyone alive." He paused, then added with genuine remorse, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Outside the plane, the situation was escalating in ways the airline hadn't anticipated. Word had spread through the terminal about a black female officer being mistreated and several military personnel waiting. For other flights had gathered near the gate, some in uniform, creating a visible presence that attracted media attention. On social media, the hashtag #RespectOurTroops had gained significant traction, with the initial video clips reaching hundreds of thousands of views. Someone had identified Jasmine from previous military press releases, adding her combat record to the narrative and amplifying public outrage. Craig's phone rang, and his expression transformed to one of tightly controlled panic as he listened to the voice on the other end. When he disconnected, he approached Jasmine with a markedly different demeanor. "Major Washington, our CEO has been made aware of this unfortunate situation. We'd like to offer our sincere apologies for any misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Jasmine replied steadily. "It was discrimination, plain and simple. And it needs to be addressed systematically, not with a private apology." Craig's professional smile strained at the edges. "Of course, we take these matters very seriously. I can assure you that a full investigation will be conducted. Starting with the immediate removal of that flight attendant from duty," Colonel Whitaker insisted, pointing at Miranda, who stood rigid with barely contained fury near the galley. The impasse continued as airline officials attempted to find a solution that would allow the flight to depart without further damage to their rapidly deteriorating public image. Meanwhile, passengers grew increasingly restless and vocal in their support of Jasmine, creating an unprecedented alliance that crossed racial and social boundaries. United by respect for military service and growing indignation at the airline's handling of the situation. For Jasmine, who had faced enemy fire without flinching, this battle on American soil tested a different kind of courage. But with each passing minute, as strangers became allies in her fight for dignity, she found renewed strength in the knowledge that sometimes standing your ground was the only way to change the field of battle. 3 hours into the standoff, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from initial confusion to simmering tension. Passengers alternated between supporting Jasmine and expressing frustration about their increasingly delayed travel plans. The airline, recognizing the escalating public relations disaster, deployed their secret weapon. Victoria Slater strode onto the plane with the confident air of someone accustomed to putting out fires. Her tailored charcoal suit and perfectly Coiffed dark hair projected corporate authority, while her practiced smile suggested empathetic understanding that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Major Washington," Victoria began, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Slater, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience. May we speak privately?" Jasmine remained seated. "I'm comfortable discussing this here, Mrs. Slater." Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I believe we could resolve this more efficiently in private." "Efficiency isn't my primary concern," Jasmine replied evenly. "Transparency is." Recognizing the futility of further insistence, Victoria took the temporarily vacant seat across the aisle. "Major, on behalf of the airline, I want to express our deepest regrets about this unfortunate incident. We value our military personnel tremendously. This wasn't an incident, Ms. Slater. It was deliberate discrimination by your employee," Jasmine corrected her. "And it appears to be part of a pattern, not an isolated event." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "A pattern? I assure you, our airline has strict non-discrimination policies. Then perhaps you can explain why Miranda has multiple customer complaints for similar behavior, yet remains in a customer-facing position." The momentary widening of Victoria's eyes confirmed Jasmine's suspicion, based on information General Brooks had quickly gathered through military channels. "Personnel matters are confidential," Victoria recovered smoothly. "But I can assure you this situation will be thoroughly investigated." She lowered her voice, leaning closer. "Major Washington, we're prepared to offer you significant compensation to resolve this matter expeditiously. First-class travel anywhere in the world, perhaps? Or a monetary settlement that reflects our sincere regret?" "I'm not interested in compensation," Jasmine stated firmly. "I want accountability and systemic change." Victoria's friendly demeanor cooled several degrees. "Major, I understand your frustration, but consider the practicalities. This standoff isn't benefiting anyone. These passengers need to reach their destinations. You have an important ceremony tomorrow." "A ceremony recognizing my commitment to principles," Jasmine countered. "Principles I won't compromise for convenience." Victoria studied her for a long moment before shifting tactics. "You've had an impressive military career, Major. It would be unfortunate to see it damaged over this." The implied threat hung in the air between them. "Are you threatening a decorated officer?" Colonel Whitaker interjected sharply from where he stood nearby. Victoria's smile returned instantly. "Not at all. I'm simply suggesting that prolonged public disputes can have unforeseen consequences for everyone involved." The conversation triggered a flashback for Jasmine to her early officer training days at Fort Benning. A superior officer had questioned her abilities with thinly veiled racial skepticism, assigning her additional physical tests not required of her white counterparts. When she'd outperformed expectations and formally reported the disparate treatment, she'd been labeled difficult and overly sensitive. The incident had nearly derailed her career before it began, saved only by the intervention of a fair-minded colonel who recognized both her talent and the injustice she'd faced. Victoria's voice pulled her back to the present. "Our board includes several former military leaders with significant Pentagon connections. I'm sure they'd agree that resolving this quietly serves everyone's interests." The implication was clear. Victoria wasn't just threatening Jasmine's current position, but her entire military future. "The security footage would clarify everything," Tyler Freeman suggested, having overheard portions of the conversation. "Surely that's the most objective approach." Victoria's smile never wavered. "Unfortunately, as my colleague mentioned earlier, there appears to be a technical issue with the cameras in this section today." "How remarkably convenient," Colonel Whitaker observed dryly. "In my experience, such technical issues frequently arise when the truth is inconvenient." While Victoria continued her pressure campaign with Jasmine, Colonel Whitaker quietly moved through the cabin, collecting contact information from passengers willing to provide witness statements. Despite subtle intimidation from airline staff, who hinted at potential travel bans for interfering with airline operations, several passengers eagerly provided their information. "This isn't just about one flight or one officer," a middle-aged woman in row 5 told the colonel as she wrote down her details. "My son's in the Army. This could happen to him." Victoria, noticing the colonel's activities, dispatched airline personnel to intercept him. "Sir, soliciting personal information from passengers violates our privacy policies. Documenting witness testimony to discrimination violates nothing except your attempts at suppression," he retorted, continuing his efforts undeterred. Meanwhile, despite airline attempts to confiscate devices or prevent recordings, several passengers had been live streaming portions of the confrontation. One particularly damning clip captured Miranda referring to Jasmine as "these people in uniform thinking they deserve special treatment," while making a dismissive gesture toward her medals. When informed of the spreading footage, Victoria's composed facade briefly cracked. "This situation has been grossly misrepresented on social media," she announced loudly to the cabin. "Recording airline staff without consent violates our policies and federal aviation regulations." "Actually," a young law student spoke up from row 7, "recording in public spaces where there's no expectation of privacy is perfectly legal, especially when documenting potential civil rights violations." As Victoria struggled to regain control of the narrative, Jasmine remained the calm center of the storm, her military training in crisis management serving her well. She understood that Victoria's aggressive tactics revealed the company's vulnerability. Their desperate attempts to contain the situation suggested they recognized their indefensible position, but were more concerned with public perception than addressing the actual discrimination. After nearly an hour of failed negotiations, Victoria gathered her tablet and stood. "Major Washington, I've tried to be reasonable. We've offered generous compensation and sincere apologies. Your continued refusal to accept these good faith efforts forces us to consider this a deliberate attempt to damage our company's reputation. There will be consequences." As Victoria turned to leave, Colonel Whitaker called after her. "The only damage to your reputation comes from your own actions, Ms. Slater. Major Washington didn't create this situation. Your employee did." Victoria paused, then turned with a cold smile. "Colonel, with all due respect to your service, this is a complex situation with legal implications beyond what might be immediately apparent. I suggest everyone consider carefully how their actions today might be viewed under scrutiny." With that parting threat, Victoria exited the aircraft, leaving behind a cabin full of increasingly unified passengers who recognized the corporation's attempt to bully a soldier who had faced literal enemy fire with less fear than Victoria's implied threats had provoked. What Victoria didn't realize as she departed was that her intimidation tactics had just converted several previously neutral observers into active allies in Jasmine's cause. The corporation had shown its true colors, and the battle lines were now clearly drawn. After nearly 4 hours of extraordinary tension, passengers are finally being deplaned, reported Sandra Mitchell, a local Atlanta news correspondent broadcasting live from Gate C-17. Behind her, frustrated travelers streamed into the terminal, many immediately pulling out phones to share their experiences on social media. Sources tell us the disruption began when a flight attendant allegedly discriminated against a black female Army officer in uniform. News of the incident had spread like wildfire. What started as passenger videos had escalated into a full-blown media event, with 3 local stations and 1 national network already on site. Airport authorities attempted to redirect the displaced passengers through a less visible exit, but several immediately approached the waiting reporters, eager to share their accounts. "I was sitting 2 rows behind her," a middle-aged woman told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter. "That flight attendant deliberately pushed her, twice, and the things she said under her breath. I wouldn't repeat them on television." Meanwhile, in a sleek downtown office building, the airline's public relations team scrambled to construct a narrative that would minimize damage. Within an hour of Victoria's failed negotiations, they released a carefully worded statement. "We are investigating reports of a misunderstanding between a crew member and a passenger. Our airline has the utmost respect for military personnel, and we are working directly with the parties involved to resolve this matter appropriately." The calculated vagueness and reframing of blatant discrimination as a misunderstanding only fueled public outrage. Veterans organizations were particularly vocal in their criticism, with the American Legion issuing an immediate statement condemning the airline's response as woefully inadequate and calling for a boycott until appropriate Action is taken. Jasmine, finally off the plane but still in the terminal, found herself in an unexpected position. General Brooks had texted her repeatedly with increasingly cautious messages. Command aware of situation. Proceed with discretion. Media attention escalating. Suggest minimal public comment. Pentagon Public Affairs requesting you refer inquiries to official channels. The military's hesitation to fully support her publicly stung Jasmine deeply. She had always been the model officer, following protocol even in the most chaotic battlefield situations. Now facing injustice on American soil, she found herself navigating institutional caution that felt disturbingly like abandonment. Major Washington, could you share your perspective on what happened today? A reporter thrust a microphone toward her as she attempted to make her way through the terminal. Colonel Whitaker, who had appointed himself her unofficial advocate, stepped between them. The Major has no comment at this time. This is a matter of civil rights and military dignity that will be addressed through appropriate channels. But Colonel, passengers are saying this was a clear case of racial discrimination, the reporter persisted. The videos speak for themselves, the Colonel replied firmly. Now please excuse us. As Jasmine checked into the airport hotel where the airline had reluctantly arranged accommodations for stranded passengers, memories of a similar situation from her early career surfaced. 3 years earlier, she'd been passed over for promotion despite having evaluation scores superior to those of promoted colleagues. When she'd questioned the decision through official channels, her commanding officer had advised her to let it go for the sake of her career. Sometimes fighting costs more than acceptance, Washington, he'd told her. She'd followed his advice then, swallowing the injustice for the greater goal of continued service. Now scrolling through the explosion of social media coverage, she wondered if she'd made the right choice. The hashtag, Justice for Major Washington, was trending nationwide, with veterans and civilians alike rallying to her cause. Yet the military's official silence was deafening. Her phone rang with a DC area code she didn't recognize. Major Washington, she answered crisply. Major, this is General Harrington's office at the Pentagon. The aide's voice was professionally neutral. Given today's events, the general suggests postponing tomorrow's ceremony until this matter is resolved, for everyone's benefit. The implication was clear. Her stand against discrimination was becoming an embarrassment to the chain of command. I understand, Jasmine replied, her throat tight with disappointment. Tomorrow's ceremony was to be the pinnacle of her career, recognition of sacrifice and courage under fire. Now it was being stripped away because she'd stood against injustice at home. She'd barely disconnected when breaking news alerts began flooding her phone. Miranda Evans, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy, had given an exclusive interview to a sympathetic conservative news outlet. I feel absolutely devastated by how this has been portrayed, Miranda said tearfully on screen, carefully coiffed and composed despite her performance of distress. I have nothing but respect for our military. My own father was a veteran. This was simply a misunderstanding that's been blown completely out of proportion. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. You're saying you never pushed Major Washington or made discriminatory comments? Absolutely not, Miranda declared emphatically. I would never do such a thing. I was simply following our standard procedures when the Major became confrontational. The blatant falsehood made Jasmine's blood boil, but worse was to come. The airline had somehow obtained security footage from Jasmine entering the terminal, carefully edited to show only a brief moment when she appeared to gesture emphatically while speaking to the ticket agent. The footage, completely unrelated to the actual incident, was presented with the misleading caption, Major Washington displaying agitated behavior before boarding. The calculated character assassination continued when an anonymous airline source leaked details of a minor disciplinary incident from Jasmine's personnel file, dating back 5 years. The incident, in which she'd formally reported sexual harassment from a superior officer, was twisted to portray her as having a history of making allegations against authority figures. Social media, initially overwhelmingly supportive, began showing cracks as trolls and skeptics amplified the airline's narrative. Another professional victim playing the race card read one comment with thousands of likes. Maybe she should focus on serving her country instead of causing scenes, suggested another. Even Tyler Freeman, who had witnessed the entire incident firsthand, found his credibility attacked when he spoke to media defending Jasmine. Within hours of his television appearance, anonymous accounts began circulating unsubstantiated claims that he had a history of filing frivolous complaints against businesses for personal gain. The coordinated counterattack left Jasmine feeling isolated and exposed. When she called General Brooks for guidance, his response was measured but discouraging. "Washington, you know I support you," he said carefully. "But this is becoming a media circus, and the Pentagon hates circuses. There's significant pressure to resolve this quietly." "By resolve, you mean I should accept their apology and compensation," Jasmine stated flatly. The general's silence confirmed her suspicion. "Sir, with all due respect, this isn't just about me," she continued. "It's about every service member who might face this kind of treatment. If I back down now—" "I understand your position, Jasmine," he interrupted, the unusual use of her first name emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. "But consider the bigger picture. Your career, everything you've worked for, all potentially compromised over an airline incident." The characterization of blatant discrimination as merely an airline incident struck Jasmine like a physical blow. Even her mentor and strongest advocate within the military was suggesting she prioritize institutional comfort over justice. When a soft knock came at her hotel room door, Jasmine was surprised to find not just Colonel Whitaker, but 15 other current and former military personnel, all staying at the same hotel and all determined to support her fight. "Major," the colonel said with a respectful nod, "we thought you could use some reinforcements." For the first time since the ordeal began, Jasmine felt tears threatening. This impromptu band of brothers and sisters in arms, spanning generations and backgrounds, reminded her why she served in the first place. Not for recognition or advancement, but for the principles that transcended any single battle or institution. "The airline and even some in the military may want you to stand down," Colonel Whitaker continued. "But that's not what soldiers do when facing injustice. We stand our ground." As the group strategized into the night, a social media campaign launched by military spouses and veterans began turning the tide back in Jasmine's favor. "Stand with Major Washington" became the new rallying cry, accompanied by thousands of photos of service members in uniform and civilians who supported them. The battle had shifted from a single airplane cabin to the court of public opinion, with Jasmine at the center of a struggle that now represented something far larger than one incident of discrimination. It had become a test of whether America's professed reverence for its military extended to all who served, regardless of their skin color. Have you ever noticed how corporations try to twist the narrative when they're caught doing something wrong? Comment number 1. If you believe military personnel like Major Washington deserve respect regardless of their race, hit that like button if you're disgusted by Miranda's fake tears and blatant lies during her interview. Subscribe now for the next part of this powerful story that mainstream media won't tell you completely. Do you think the Pentagon will stand behind Major Washington, or will they sacrifice her to avoid controversy? Let's see how this brave soldier continues her fight against a system designed to silence her. The next morning dawned clear and crisp in Washington, D.C., a perfect spring day that belied the storm brewing inside the Pentagon's imposing walls. Jasmine had arrived on the first available flight, determined to attend her medal ceremony despite the controversy. Her dress uniform, meticulously pressed the previous week with anticipation, now felt like armor as she navigated the Pentagon's labyrinthine corridors. She noticed the subtle changes immediately. Officers who would normally greet her with warm camaraderie now offered brief nods before finding reasons to hurry elsewhere. Conversations hushed as she approached. In the building where she had earned respect through years of dedicated service, Jasmine suddenly felt like an outsider. General Brooks met her outside the ceremony room, his normally confident demeanor replaced by cautious formality. "Washington," he greeted her, conspicuously avoiding the customary handshake that might appear in someone's smartphone photo. "We need to talk before the ceremony." He guided her to a small conference room, checking twice to ensure the door was securely closed before speaking. "The situation has escalated beyond what anyone anticipated. The airline's CEO called the EO Joint Chiefs directly last night. The Joint Chiefs? Jasmine couldn't mask her surprise. For an airline incident? Richard Thornton sits on 3 defense contractor boards and plays golf weekly with General Mitchell, Brooks explained, naming the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In Washington, connections often matter more than facts. So what does this mean for today? Jasmine asked, though she already suspected the answer. Brooks' expression confirmed her fears. The ceremony has been moved from the main hall to this conference room. No press, minimal attendance. The official reason is scheduling conflicts, but he trailed off, the actual reason hanging unspoken between them. Jasmine absorbed this news with the stoic composure that had served her through battlefield crises. I see. And the medal itself? Still being awarded, Brooks assured her quickly. Your actions in Afghanistan were extraordinary, Washington. No one disputes that. Just my actions yesterday, she concluded flatly. Brooks sighed heavily. The military exists within a complex political ecosystem. Global Air's parent company, Thornton Industries, supplies crucial components for 3 major defense systems currently under congressional review. Their CEO has made it clear that negative publicity affects their stock price, which affects their R&D budget, which potentially affects national security. The twisted logic stunned Jasmine. So my right to be treated with basic human dignity is less important than a defense contractor's stock price? I'm not saying it's right, Brooks replied, genuine regret in his voice. I'm saying it's the reality we're navigating. Further discussion was interrupted by a crisp knock before a young lieutenant entered. General, they're ready for the ceremony. What should have been Jasmine's proudest professional moment instead became a rushed, awkward affair. A half-dozen officers stood at attention in the cramped conference room as General Brooks read a truncated citation of her heroism before presenting the Distinguished Service Medal. No photographers documented the moment. No family members had been invited. The traditional reception afterward had been canceled due to logistics issues. As they filed out, a senior Pentagon public affairs officer approached Jasmine. Major Washington, we've prepared a statement regarding yesterday's unfortunate incident. We'd appreciate your review and signature before release. The carefully worded statement characterized the airline confrontation as a misunderstanding that has been amicably resolved, and quoted Jasmine as expressing appreciation for the airline's responsive handling of the situation. I can't sign this, Jasmine stated firmly, returning the tablet. It's fundamentally untrue. The officer's pleasant expression didn't waver. Major, consider this an opportunity to put this unfortunate incident behind you. Your promotion board convenes next month. Career advancement requires not just battlefield courage but political awareness. The implied threat couldn't have been clearer. Jasmine thought of her father's voice. Standing for what's right isn't always rewarded, Jazzy, but you'll sleep better at night. I appreciate the advice, she replied evenly, but I won't put my name to something that undermines the dignity of the uniform. As Jasmine left the Pentagon, her newly awarded medal feeling strangely heavy in her pocket rather than proudly displayed on her chest, she received a text from General Brooks. Unofficial word from Promotion Committee. Your file has been flagged for additional review before next month's board. I'm sorry, Washington. The message confirmed what she had already suspected. Her stand against discrimination had placed her career in jeopardy. 12 years of exemplary service, including combat heroism, now potentially derailed because she had refused to accept being physically pushed and verbally degraded. Later that afternoon, during a scheduled briefing with junior officers who had requested her mentorship, Jasmine noticed that the previously packed room now contained only 5 young lieutenants instead of the expected 20. One of them, Lieutenant Daniels, approached her afterward. Ma'am, I just wanted you to know, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Most of us wanted to be here. We were strongly encouraged to attend other priority training instead. Jasmine nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Thank you, Lieutenant. What they're doing isn't right, Major, Daniels continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Many of us, we look up to you. Not just for what you did in Afghanistan, but for yesterday too. Those simple words, spoken at personal risk by a junior officer, provided more comfort than Daniels could possibly know. As the young lieutenants who had defied subtle pressure to avoid her filed out, each offering a crisp, respectful salute, Jasmine felt renewed resolve. If her stand gave these young officers courage to face similar situations, perhaps the personal cost was worth bearing. That evening, alone in her temporary quarters, Jasmine reflected on her father's wisdom when she'd faced discrimination in high school. "There are battles you fight for yourself, Jazzy," he'd said, "and battles you fight for those who'll come after you. The second kind are always harder, always costlier, and always more important." Her phone chimed with an incoming call from Colonel Whitaker. "They're trying to bury this, aren't they?" he asked without preamble. "It appears so," Jasmine confirmed. "Well, I've been making some calls to old Army buddies," the colonel informed her. "Turns out several of them have daughters and granddaughters in service now. They're not particularly pleased about the Pentagon's handling of this situation." A small spark of hope kindled in Jasmine's chest. "Thank you, Colonel. But I don't want anyone else risking their position." "With respect, Major, that's not your call," Whitaker replied firmly. "Some principles transcend rank and retirement status. This is one of them." The conversation strengthened Jasmine's resolve. If veterans like Colonel Whitaker were willing to use their limited political capital to support her stand, she couldn't surrender simply to protect her career prospects. The battle had evolved beyond her personal situation to represent a fundamental question about military values and institutional integrity. As she prepared for bed, Jasmine received one final message, this one from an unknown number. Deployment, orders being processed, remote assignment, effective immediately after promotion board. Unofficial, from a friend who thinks you should know. The message confirmed her worst fears. Not only was her promotion in jeopardy, but plans were already underway to exile her to some distant posting where her troublemaking would attract less attention. The system was closing ranks, determined to isolate the infection of her principled stand before it could spread. Yet, as she stared at the ominous message, Jasmine felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The institutions she had trusted, the military she had dedicated her life to, the country she had risked everything to defend, were showing their imperfections. But their failure to live up to their professed values didn't negate the validity of those values themselves. "If they want to fight," she whispered to the empty room, "they've picked the wrong soldier. Major Washington. I'm Captain Marcus Reynolds, JAG Corps." The young military lawyer who greeted Jasmine outside the Pentagon cafeteria the next morning had an earnest demeanor that belied his sharp intelligence. "I heard about your situation. Through some mutual connections. I believe I can help." Jasmine studied him cautiously. After yesterday's clear message from the Pentagon hierarchy, anyone offering assistance might be setting a trap. "Help how exactly, Captain?" "By showing you that you're not the first, and unfortunately won't be the last," Marcus replied, sliding a thin folder across the table. This contains summaries of 17 similar incidents involving military personnel of color over the past 5 years. All quietly resolved, all buried in administrative files. Jasmine leafed through the documents, each one detailing discrimination against service members in various civilian settings, hotels, restaurants, airports, followed by institutional pressure to resolve matters quietly. The pattern was unmistakable and disturbingly familiar. "How did you compile this?" she asked, impressed by the thoroughness of his research. "There's an informal network," Marcus explained carefully. "Female officers, officers of color, those who faced similar situations. We document everything, share information, provide support. Your situation has galvanized many who previously stayed silent." Over the next several days, Jasmine discovered the extent of this underground support system. What began as furtive meetings with Captain Reynolds expanded to include dozens of officers and enlisted personnel who had experienced similar discrimination. Each shared their stories, offering both solidarity and practical resources. Meanwhile, Colonel Whitaker had mobilized his own network of veterans, many now in positions of influence throughout government and private industry. An anonymous tip led to the discovery that Miranda Evans, the flight attendant who had assaulted Jasmine, had a documented history of passenger complaints specifically targeting people of color and those in uniform. 7 formal complaints in the past 2 years, Captain Reynolds reported during a secure meeting in his modest apartment, away from prying eyes and potential recording devices, all buried by customer service, all involving minorities or military personnel whom she deemed inappropriate for first class. And yet she kept her position, Jasmine noted. Her brother-in-law is Global Air's Regional Operations Director, Reynolds explained. Family connections trumped passenger safety and dignity. The network also revealed that Tyler Freeman, the businessman who had witnessed and supported Jasmine's account, had been fired from his executive position at a financial firm with ties to the airline's parent company. The official reason cited restructuring, but the timing left little doubt about the actual motivation. "They're sending a message," Reynolds observed grimly. "Cross us, and we'll destroy your livelihood." The intimidation tactics extended beyond Tyler. Colonel Whitaker reported that several passengers who had spoken to media supporting Jasmine had received letters from Global Air's legal department warning of potential lawsuits for defamatory statements. Yet for every person silenced by corporate threats, others stepped forward. A flight attendant from Global Air, risking her career, anonymously provided internal company documents revealing systematic profiling practices. The airline's training materials included coded language about identifying potentially disruptive passengers, with criteria that disproportionately targeted minorities. "Look at this section," Captain Reynolds highlighted during one strategy session. "It instructs crew to give additional scrutiny to passengers who appear inconsistent with the typical first-class demographic. That's corporate-approved discrimination, hiding behind security protocols." As evidence mounted, so did the opposition's tactics. A social media researcher in their growing alliance discovered coordinated attacks against Jasmine online, traced to accounts linked to a public relations firm on Global Air's payroll. The campaign included manipulated photos of Jasmine appearing aggressive, fabricated accounts of previous incidents, and dog-whistle racial commentary questioning her qualifications and character. More disturbingly, a tech-savvy lieutenant discovered surveillance malware on Jasmine's personal phone. "They're monitoring your calls, texts, location," she explained, replacing Jasmine's device with a secure alternative. "This level of intrusion suggests they see you as a serious threat to their corporate interests." The escalating tactics only strengthened the resolve of Jasmine's growing coalition. Each new revelation attracted more supporters, including civil rights organizations, that recognized the case's potential to highlight the intersection of racial discrimination and military service. "They expected you to back down," Colonel Whitaker told Jasmine during a secure meeting in a public park, away from potential listening devices. "When you didn't, they expected the military to force you to back down. When that didn't work completely, they expected isolation to break your will. Each time you stand firm, you gain more allies than they can silence." The network's most significant breakthrough came when Captain Reynolds obtained internal communications between Global Air executives discussing the incident. The emails provided by a whistleblower inside the company's legal department revealed calculated efforts to discredit Jasmine rather than address the actual discrimination. "This is the smoking gun," Reynolds declared, highlighting a particularly damning exchange. The VP of Operations specifically instructed HR to find anything usable in Miranda's personnel file to justify her actions retroactively. They were never interested in the truth, only in protecting their reputation. For Jasmine, who had always believed in systems and institutions, the revelations were both disillusioning and enlightening. The military that had shaped her identity was failing to uphold its professed values, while ordinary people, fellow officers, veterans, even civilians with no connection to the case, were risking their positions to support principles larger than themselves. As their evidence grew, so did their strategy. What had begun as Jasmine's personal stand against discrimination was evolving into a coordinated campaign for accountability that extended far beyond one incident on one flight. "They've been doing this for years," Captain Reynolds explained during a strategy session. using corporate power to bully victims into silence, leveraging political connections to avoid consequences. Your case could change that pattern if we're smart about how we proceed. The Alliance's most powerful potential weapon emerged when a major civil rights organization offered legal support, recognizing the case's potential for landmark precedent. Their attorneys brought resources and expertise that transformed the scattered evidence into a cohesive legal strategy. This isn't just about one flight attendant's actions, the lead attorney explained to Jasmine. It's about corporate policies that enable discrimination, about institutional failures to protect those who serve our country, and about the intersection of military status and racial identity. Your case touches nerves that resonate with millions of Americans. As preparations for legal action progressed, Jasmine received disturbing news from her sister. "Someone's been asking questions about you at my school," Maya Washington reported nervously. "A man claiming to be writing an article about military families. He knew details about your deployment that aren't public information." The intrusion into her family's privacy crystallized the stakes for Jasmine. This was no longer just about her career or even her dignity. The opposition was willing to target her loved ones. The realization prompted both anger and renewed determination. "They think intimidation will make me retreat," she told Captain Reynolds. "They've fundamentally misunderstood who they're dealing with. I've faced enemy fire. Corporate bullying doesn't compare." As their case solidified and support grew, Jasmine and her allies prepared for the next phase. A formal complaint that would force both the airline and the military to address the discrimination publicly. The documents, testimonies, and evidence they had gathered formed a compelling narrative that would be difficult to dismiss or bury. The night before filing their comprehensive complaint, Jasmine received an unexpected call. General Brooks, who had been conspicuously silent since their Pentagon meeting, reached out with a cryptic message. "Washington, watch your back tomorrow. Big moves happening at high levels. Stay strong." Before she could ask for clarification, he ended the call. The warning confirmed what their intelligence had already suggested. Powerful forces were mobilizing against them. But it also revealed something equally important. Even within the system that seemed aligned against her, Jasmine had allies unwilling to abandon principle entirely. As she prepared for bed that night, reviewing their strategy one final time, Jasmine felt a complex mixture of emotions. Determination tinged with anxiety, hope shadowed by practical awareness of the powers aligned against them. Yet underlying everything was a profound certainty that regardless of the outcome, standing for truth against institutional pressure was its own victory. "They didn't train me to surrender when outgunned," she whispered to herself. "They trained me to fight." "Smarter!" Jasmine knew something was wrong the moment she approached her temporary quarters. The door, which she had double-locked that morning, stood slightly ajar, a thin blade of light cutting across the darkened hallway. Her combat instincts immediately engaged, approach cautiously, assess the situation, prepare for confrontation. Inside, the apartment had been methodically ransacked. Drawers hung open, their contents scattered. Her laptop was missing, along with her briefcase containing sensitive documents related to both her military duties and the discrimination case. Most alarming, her spare uniform and medals had been taken, including the Distinguished Service Medal she had received in that hurried, diminished ceremony. "They're escalating," Captain Reynolds observed grimly after arriving to document the break-in. "This isn't random theft, it's targeted intimidation." The local police who responded treated it as a routine burglary, showing minimal interest despite the military documents involved. "Probably just teenagers looking for electronics," the officer suggested with casual dismissal. "We'll file a report, but don't expect much." The break-in marked the beginning of a coordinated counteroffensive against Jasmine and her supporters. The next morning, a national news program aired a segment questioning the authenticity of Jasmine's military accomplishments. Sources close to the investigation suggest Major Washington's account of heroism in Afghanistan may have been significantly exaggerated, the somber-voiced anchor reported. Pentagon officials are reportedly reviewing the circumstances surrounding her combat medals. The sources remained conveniently anonymous, and the Pentagon issued no official statement confirming such a review, but the damage was done. Seeds of doubt had been planted in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, Jasmine's younger sister Maya called in tears. "Someone contacted the principal at my school," she reported shakily. "They implied I might be involved in helping you steal and leak classified information. Jasmine, the principal called me into his office. My teaching position could be at risk." The targeting of her sister, a kindergarten teacher with no connection to the case beyond family loyalty, revealed the lengths to which their opponents would go. Clearly, they had moved beyond professional retaliation to personal destruction. Colonel Whitaker, who had become Jasmine's most stalwart ally, suffered consequences as well. During a heated strategy meeting, the 72-year-old veteran clutched suddenly at his chest, his face contorting with pain. "Call an ambulance!" Captain Reynolds shouted as Whitaker collapsed into a chair, struggling to breathe. The heart attack wasn't severe enough to be fatal, thankfully, but doctors confirmed it had been triggered by extreme stress. From his hospital bed, the colonel refused to back down. "They think this will stop me?" he wheezed defiantly. "My first heart attack was in the Mekong Delta under enemy fire. This is nothing." The most systematic attack targeted Jasmine's financial stability. She discovered all her accounts mysteriously frozen, with her bank citing a security review triggered by suspicious activity patterns. Without access to her funds, she was effectively stranded in Washington with no means to pay for lodging, transportation, or even meals. "This isn't coincidence," Captain Reynolds concluded after his inquiries revealed that the bank's parent company shared 3 board members with Global Air's corporate structure. "They're cutting off your resources to force capitulation." The coordinated pressure campaign extended to the military hierarchy as well. General Brooks, Jasmine's longtime mentor and advocate, received sudden transfer orders to an obscure joint command in Alaska, effectively removing him from any position to influence her case. "They're isolating you," Reynolds explained grimly. "Removing allies, cutting off support, creating a situation where surrender seems like the only rational option." The Pentagon hearing that would determine Jasmine's professional future was abruptly rescheduled, moved up by 3 weeks, giving her minimal time to prepare. The sudden change reeked of strategic manipulation, a calculated effort to catch her off balance and under-resourced. Even media coverage, initially favorable, began shifting as Global Air's extensive advertising budget apparently influenced editorial decisions. Stories about Jasmine's case disappeared from primetime coverage, replaced by human interest pieces about the challenges of air travel and the difficult job of flight attendants. Social media remained her strongest platform, but even there, sophisticated bots and paid trolls worked overtime to bury supportive hashtags and amplify negative narratives. Major Washington lied began trending, pushed by accounts with suspiciously similar patterns and minimal prior activity. The most personal blow came when tabloid reporters contacted Jasmine's former boyfriend, a fellow officer she had dated briefly 3 years earlier. The relationship had ended amicably when their deployment schedules made it unsustainable, but now reporters offered substantial payment for any insights into her character and behavior. To his credit, Captain James Riley refused the bait. Instead, he immediately warned Jasmine about the attempted character assassination. "They offered $20,000 for dirt," he reported disgustedly. "When I said there wasn't any, they suggested specific angles to recall, that you were volatile, status-obsessed, prone to exaggeration. They weren't looking for truth, Jazz. They were shopping for a narrative." The relentless attacks began taking a psychological toll. Jasmine, who had maintained remarkable composure through battlefield crises, found herself questioning her own judgment. Late at night, alone in temporary housing arranged by supporters after her apartment break-in, doubts crept in. Was this fight worth the devastating personal cost? Was she being selfish, putting principle above the careers of those who supported her? "That's exactly what they want," Captain Reynolds insisted when she voiced these doubts. "Second-guessing yourself, questioning your own experience. Classic gaslighting at an institutional level." The tide began to turn when their network's most valuable asset finally emerged. a mid-level employee in Global Air's Human Resources Department, disturbed by the company's tactics, agreed to become a whistleblower. This insider confirmed that the airline had established a special task force specifically to discredit Jasmine, utilizing corporate resources that far exceeded normal customer complaint protocols. They're terrified of the precedent your case could set, the whistleblower explained in a secure communication. It's not just about one incident anymore. If you succeed, it opens the door for others to challenge systemic practices the company has relied on for years. More critically, the whistleblower provided evidence that surveillance devices had been planted in Jasmine's temporary quarters, explaining how opponents had consistently stayed one step ahead of their strategy. With this discovery, Captain Reynolds arranged immediate relocation to secure housing provided by veterans organizations. The Pentagon hearing loomed closer, with Jasmine's military career hanging in the balance. The hastily assembled tribunal included officers with suspicious connections to defense contractors associated with Global Air's parent company. The deck was clearly stacked against her, with procedural rules seemingly designed to minimize evidence of discrimination while maximizing scrutiny of Jasmine's conduct unbecoming an officer. They've created a show trial, Colonel Whitaker observed from his hospital bed, where he continued to coordinate veteran support despite doctors' orders to avoid stress. The outcome is predetermined. What they don't realize is that sometimes losing the battle publicly can help win the larger war for accountability. On the eve of the hearing, as Jasmine and Captain Reynolds finalized their approach, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. Tyler Freeman, the businessman who had witnessed the original incident and subsequently lost his job for supporting Jasmine, contacted them through secure channels. "I've been documenting everything since day one," he revealed during their clandestine meeting. "I started recording on my phone as soon as I saw how that flight attendant was treating you, but I kept it private because I suspected they'd try to discredit or suppress it. After what they did to my career, I knew I needed the perfect moment for maximum impact." The unedited video he provided captured the entire incident from an angle that left no room for misinterpretation. Miranda's deliberate physical contact, her racially charged comments, the systematic denial of service, all were documented with crystal clarity that contradicted every element of the airline's official narrative. "This changes everything," Captain Reynolds declared, reviewing the footage for the third time. "With this evidence, they can't rely on their misunderstanding defense. It's explicit discrimination captured in real time." As they incorporated this crucial evidence into their strategy, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a respected officer on the verge of promotion to a target of corporate and institutional retaliation, all because she had refused to accept being physically assaulted and verbally degraded. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she told Reynolds as they finalized their preparations, "we've already won a more important victory. We've exposed mechanisms of power typically hidden from view. We've created a record that others can learn from." That night, alone in her secure housing, Jasmine called her sister Maya. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through because of my fight," she said softly. "Don't you dare apologize," Maya replied fiercely. "Dad would be so proud of you, Jazz. Remember what he always told us? Washington women don't bow their heads to injustice, even when standing tall costs something." The reminder of their father's wisdom brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. He had died 5 years earlier, never seeing her rise to the rank of major or earn her combat decorations. But his principles had shaped her identity in ways that transcended professional advancement or institutional approval. As she prepared for bed, steeling herself for the hearing that might end her military career, Jasmine found herself at peace with the possible outcomes. Win or lose tomorrow, she had remained true to herself and to values more enduring than any single institution. Have you ever noticed how powerful entities fight back when challenged? The way they target not just the person standing up, but everyone around them? Comment number 1 if you believe whistleblowers like Tyler Freeman are the real patriots in stories like this. Hit that like button if you're outraged by how corporations and institutions can coordinate to silence those who expose discrimination. Subscribe now to see how Major Washington faces this crucial hearing that could end her distinguished military career. Will the unedited video be enough to overcome a system determined to protect itself at all costs? Or will the powerful forces aligned against The Pentagon hearing room exuded austere authority, polished mahogany tables arranged in a horseshoe, military flags standing sentinel along the back wall, portraits of stern-faced generals observing from above. As Jasmine entered in full dress uniform, medals precisely aligned across her chest, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. This room had witnessed countless career determinations, from commendations to court-martials, each following the military's rigid protocols and traditions. Today's proceeding, however, operated under unusual parameters. Officially designated as an administrative review of conduct, it functioned with rules conveniently tailored to disadvantage Jasmine's position. The five-officer panel, led by Colonel Richard Hargrove, a stern-faced man with political ambitions, watched impassively as she took her seat beside Captain Reynolds. "This proceeding will come to order," Colonel Hargrove announced, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who had already reached his conclusion. "We are convened to review the conduct of Major Jasmine Washington regarding the incident aboard Global Air Flight 1477 on April 17th and subsequent actions that may constitute conduct unbecoming an officer." The framing immediately established. The narrative, Jasmine, not the airline or flight attendant, was under scrutiny. Her subsequent actions, standing firm against discrimination, positioned as potentially more problematic than the discrimination itself. "Major Washington will have the opportunity to present her account," Hargrove continued, "followed by testimony from relevant witnesses. The panel will then determine if her actions meet the standards expected of an officer in the United States Army." Captain Reynolds leaned close to whisper, "They've stacked the deck, but remember, we're playing for a larger audience than just this panel." The proceedings began with Jasmine recounting the incident, maintaining the same measured composure that had served her through the original confrontation. She detailed Miranda's deliberate physical contact, the discriminatory comments, the systematic denial of service provided to other first-class passengers, and the subsequent escalation. When she refused to accept such treatment, Colonel Hargrove interrupted frequently with questions that seemed designed to undermine rather than clarify. Couldn't this physical contact have been accidental in the confined space of an aircraft cabin? Is it possible you misheard or misinterpreted Ms. Evans's comments? Might your military demeanor have been perceived as intimidating by civilian staff? Each question attempted to reframe discrimination as misunderstanding, to shift responsibility from perpetrator to victim. Jasmine parried each with factual precision, refusing to be diverted from her clear account. When Global Air executives testified next, they presented a carefully constructed narrative that portrayed the airline as committed to diversity while characterizing the incident as an unfortunate miscommunication. Victoria Slater, now identified as Executive Vice President of Customer Experience, offered a masterclass in corporate evasion. "Global Air has the utmost respect for military personnel," she declared with practiced sincerity. "We fly thousands of service members annually without incident. This isolated situation represents a regrettable breakdown in communication, not a pattern of behavior." Miranda Evans followed, transformed by careful coaching into a sympathetic figure. Gone was the aggressive flight attendant who had physically pushed a passenger. In her place sat a tearful woman claiming victimhood. "I've been devastated by these accusations," Miranda testified, dabbing carefully at mascara-free eyes with a tissue. "I've served passengers with dignity for 22 years. The events have been so traumatic that my doctor has diagnosed me with PTSD. I never intended any disrespect to Major Washington or her uniform." When Captain Reynolds attempted to cross-examine Miranda about her history of similar complaints, Colonel Hargrove intervened. "That information is not relevant to this specific incident and may violate Ms. Evans' privacy rights." The systematic obstruction continued when key witnesses who had agreed to testify suddenly became unavailable. Colonel Whitaker, still hospitalized, was deemed medically unfit to participate even via video connection. 3 passengers who had submitted written statements supporting Jasmine's account were unable to be reached when the panel attempted to verify their testimony. Perhaps most damaging, the documentary evidence meticulously compiled by Captain Reynolds and their network of supporters was largely ruled inadmissible on procedural grounds. Internal airline documents showing discrimination patterns were rejected as obtained through unauthorized channels. The whistleblower's testimony was disallowed because they refused to publicly identify themselves, fearing professional retaliation. "This isn't a hearing," Captain Reynolds muttered after another key piece of evidence was disallowed. "It's theater designed to create the appearance of due process." The tide began to turn when Jasmine was permitted to speak about her military service. Rather than simply reciting her achievements, she connected her experiences to deeper principles. "In Afghanistan, I led diverse teams under extreme pressure," she explained, her calm dignity commanding attention despite the panel's obvious bias. "We survived because we respected each other's humanity regardless of background. The uniform I wear represents not just military strength, but moral principles worth defending, including the principle that every American deserves equal treatment and basic dignity." She continued with unexpected emotional candor. "My parents taught me that service means standing firm when it would be easier to stand down. My father faced similar discrimination when returning from Vietnam. He died never knowing if his sacrifice had made a difference. I promised at his grave that I would continue his fight for an America that honors its stated ideals." The personal revelation shifted the atmosphere subtly. Two panel members who had avoided eye contact began watching Jasmine with thoughtful attention. Colonel Hargrove, noticing this change, quickly called for a brief recess. When proceedings resumed, Jasmine noticed whispered consultations among panel members. Something had changed during the break, creating a current of tension that hadn't existed before. The explanation arrived with Colonel Hargrove's visible discomfort as he announced, "The panel calls Mr. Tyler Freeman as a witness." Captain Reynolds straightened in surprise. They hadn't expected the panel to allow Freeman's testimony given his previous public statements supporting Jasmine. Tyler entered with confident purpose, his business suit impeccably tailored, his manner unintimidated by the military formality surrounding him. After being sworn in, he recounted witnessing the entire incident from the seat beside Jasmine. "I initially hesitated to get involved," he admitted candidly. "As a privileged white man, I'm ashamed to say my first instinct was to mind my own business. But what I witnessed was so blatant, so deliberately humiliating, that remaining silent became impossible." His testimony corroborated Jasmine's account, in every detail, describing Miranda's physical aggression and discriminatory comments with precise recall that undermined the airline's miscommunication narrative. Colonel Hargrove attempted to discredit him. "Mr. Freeman, you lost your executive position shortly after speaking publicly about this incident. Might your testimony be motivated by personal grievance against the airline's corporate partners?" Tyler's response was measured but forceful. "Colonel, I lost a 7-figure salary and likely my career trajectory. If personal interest were my motivation, I would have remained silent then and now. I'm testifying because truth matters more than career advancement, a principle I would hope the United States military still values." The rebuke landed with visible impact. Two panel members exchanged glances that suggested growing discomfort with their assigned role. Then came the moment that transformed the proceedings. Tyler produced his phone, stating, "I have unedited video documentation of the entire incident, from initial boarding through Major Washington's call to her commanding officer." Colonel Hargrove immediately objected. "Recording on aircraft may violate federal regulations and airline policy. This evidence cannot be admitted." For the first time, another panel member, Colonel Sarah Chen, directly challenged Hargrove. "With respect, sir, federal regulations permit recording that doesn't interfere with aircraft operations. This evidence is directly relevant to our determination." The panel split, with 3 members voting to view the recording despite Hargrove's strenuous objections. As the video played on the hearing room's monitors, the atmosphere shifted definitively. The unedited footage showed with unmistakable clarity Miranda deliberately pushing Jasmine twice, the racial slur muttered under her breath, the systematic denial of service provided to other passengers, and the coordinated attempt by airline staff to intimidate rather than address the discrimination. Most damning was the captured moment, when Craig Palmer, the customer service supervisor, whispered to Miranda, "Just stick to the script. Security footage is conveniently down today." When the video ended, a heavy silence filled the room. The airline executives sat frozen, their carefully constructed narrative demolished by indisputable evidence. Even Colonel Hargrove seemed momentarily speechless, his predetermined conclusion suddenly untenable. "The panel will recess to deliberate," he finally announced, his voice lacking its previous confidence. As the officers filed out, Jasmine turned to Captain Reynolds. "Did we just win?" "We cracked their unified front," he replied cautiously. "But powerful interests don't surrender easily, even when confronted with truth. The real fight might just be beginning." For the next 2 hours, Jasmine waited in tense anticipation. Through the hearing room's doorway, she occasionally glimpsed animated discussion among panel members, with Colonel Hargrove appearing increasingly isolated as Colonel Chen and 2 others engaged in what appeared to be forceful debate. When the panel finally returned, their expressions revealed a divided outcome. Colonel Hargrove's tight-lipped frustration contrasted with Colonel Chen's composed satisfaction. "The panel has reached a determination," Hargrove announced formally. "By a vote of 3-2, we find that Major Washington's actions during and following the incident aboard Global Air Flight 1477 do not constitute conduct unbecoming an officer. The panel recommends no disciplinary action be taken regarding this matter." The technical victory came with an obvious compromise, as Hargrove continued. "However, given the public attention this incident has generated, the panel recommends Major Washington accept temporary reassignment to Fort Greely, Alaska, for a cooling-off period, while final determination regarding her promotion status remains pending." The carefully worded conclusion represented institutional face-saving, acknowledging the discrimination was real, while still attempting to remove Jasmine from public view. It wasn't complete vindication, but neither was it the career-ending censure her opponents had clearly desired. As the hearing adjourned, Victoria Slater approached with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to negotiating favorable terms from unfavorable positions. "Major Washington," she began with professional cordiality, "despite this outcome, Global Air remains interested in resolving this matter completely. Our offer of compensation stands, with enhanced terms. We're prepared to issue a public statement, acknowledging service failures without attributing deliberate misconduct. This compromise serves everyone's interests." Jasmine met her gaze steadily. "Ms. Slater, this was never about compensation. It was about accountability and ensuring others don't face similar treatment. Your compromise serves only to protect systems that enable discrimination. My answer remains no." Victoria's practiced smile tightened. "Consider carefully, Major. This panel doesn't control your ultimate career trajectory. There are higher authorities with longer memories." "I'm counting on those long memories," Jasmine replied with quiet confidence. "Because this fight isn't finished, and the evidence doesn't disappear just because one hearing has concluded." As Jasmine and Captain Reynolds gathered their materials to leave, Colonel Chen approached discreetly. "Major Washington," she said quietly, "for what it's worth, your stand has resonated with many of us who couldn't speak openly. The conversation within these walls is changing because you refuse to accept what most would have endured in silence." The acknowledgement from within the system that had tried to silence her provided unexpected validation. Jasmine had achieved a partial victory, not complete vindication, but a critical crack in the institutional armor that typically protected discrimination from consequences. Outside the Pentagon, supporters had gathered, many in uniform, others carrying signs with messages like "Stand with Major Washington" and "Dignity is non-negotiable." The spontaneous show of solidarity confirmed what Captain Reynolds had suggested earlier. The impact of her stand extended far beyond this single hearing or incident. As Tyler Freeman joined them, Jasmine expressed her gratitude for his crucial testimony. "You risked everything to speak truth. I don't know how to thank you adequately." "No thanks necessary," he replied simply. "I've been asking myself since that flight, what kind of country do we want to be? One where power silences truth, or one where principles matter more than convenience?" You helped me answer that question through your example. The partial victory, while significant, wasn't the conclusion of their battle, but rather the opening of a new phase. The airline remained determined to minimize damage through private settlements rather than systemic change. The military had acknowledged the discrimination, while still attempting to quietly relocate Jasmine away from public attention. Powerful interests continued maneuvering to protect their positions and practices, but something fundamental had shifted. The evidence was now part of official record. The narrative could no longer be completely controlled, and most importantly, Jasmine's stand had inspired others to question whether institutions that proclaimed lofty values while protecting discrimination deserved their unquestioning loyalty. As they left the Pentagon grounds, Captain Reynolds summarized their position. They offered you a technical win while trying to exile you to Alaska. Classic institutional compromise. Acknowledge the principle while undermining the practice. The question now is whether we accept half measures or press forward toward real accountability. Jasmine's response came without hesitation. My father used to say justice isn't a destination you reach once and celebrate. It's a continuous journey, requiring constant vigilance. We've won a battle today, but the campaign continues tomorrow. The sun was setting over the Pentagon as they walked toward their waiting supporters, casting long shadows across the massive building that symbolized both American military might and institutional resistance to change. For Jasmine Washington, whose career hung in uncertain balance, the path forward remained challenging but clear. Continue standing for the principles that made the uniform worth wearing, regardless of personal cost. What she couldn't yet know was that even as this hearing concluded with its ambiguous outcome, events were already unfolding that would transform her individual stand into something much larger and more consequential than she had ever imagined. The plain brown package arrived at Jasmine's temporary quarters the morning after the hearing, bearing no return address and marked simply, Urgent, Personal. Inside, she found dozens of internal Global Air documents, their corporate letterhead, and confidential watermarks confirming their authenticity. A yellow sticky note attached to the first page contained a single typewritten line. Truth deserves witnesses. Use this wisely. Captain Reynolds examined the materials with growing astonishment. This is explosive, he declared, spreading documents across the coffee table. Internal memos showing systematic profiling of passengers by race and appearance. Training materials with coded language about maintaining first-class atmosphere by discouraging non-traditional premium passengers. Performance evaluations praising flight attendants for maintaining proper passenger demographics in premium cabins. Most damning was a confidential corporate study analyzing customer complaints. The report explicitly acknowledged higher rates of service denials and security interventions involving minority passengers, but classified this as statistically insignificant variance, requiring no operational changes. This isn't just about Miranda or even Global Air, Jasmine realized, connecting broader patterns. Look at these industry associations, these consultant recommendations shared across airlines. This is systematic discrimination embedded in corporate practices. The documents revealed a disturbing network of consultants, industry groups, and corporate executives who shared best practices that effectively institutionalized discrimination while maintaining plausible deniability. Terms like cabin atmosphere management and premium service environment maintenance served as euphemisms for practices that disproportionately targeted minorities and created hostile environments for those deemed inconsistent with traditional customer profiles. As they examined the materials more carefully, they discovered evidence connecting Global Air to a broader corporate ecosystem that protected discriminatory practices across multiple industries. The same consultants who designed Global Air's passenger management protocols also created customer filtering systems for hotel chains, financial institutions, and retail establishments, all using similar coded language to mask systematic discrimination. This explains the coordinated counterattack, Captain Reynolds observed. You didn't just challenge one flight attendant or even one airline. You threatened an entire system designed to maintain exclusive spaces while denying discriminatory intent. Their strategic planning session was interrupted by an urgent call from a journalist contact. We've been trying to run your story, the reporter explained, frustration evident in her voice. But our parent company's advertising department intervened. Global Air and related companies represent 30% of our quarterly revenue. Management killed the piece, citing unsubstantiated allegations requiring additional verification. Similar reports came from other media contacts, stories mysteriously reassigned, Editorial concerns suddenly raised. Coverage indefinitely postponed. The pattern was clear. Global Air's extensive advertising relationships created effective leverage to suppress unfavorable coverage across major outlets. Undeterred, their network turned to independent journalists and online platforms beyond corporate control. Within hours, detailed accounts of both the original discrimination and the subsequent cover-up attempts began circulating through alternative channels. Social media amplified these reports, bypassing traditional gatekeepers to reach audiences directly. The response from Global Air was immediate and revealing. Victoria Slater was captured on a hot microphone during a crisis management meeting, unaware that her comments were being recorded by a conscientious employee. This has always been our problem with these minorities in uniform. They think their service entitles them to spaces and treatment reserved for our premium customers. We need to make an example here, or others will start demanding the same accommodations. The recording, anonymously provided to Jasmine's team, spread rapidly online despite aggressive attempts to remove it through copyright claims and legal threats. Victoria's unguarded comments revealed the discriminatory attitudes that lurked beneath corporate diversity statements and carefully crafted public responses. As public pressure mounted, Miranda Evans unexpectedly requested a private meeting with Jasmine. Captain Reynolds advised extreme caution. This reeks of a setup. They could be trying to record you saying something they can use against you, or creating a scenario they can misrepresent later. Heeding this warning, Jasmine agreed to the meeting only with conditions: neutral location, witnesses present, and full recording permitted by both parties. When Miranda reluctantly accepted these terms, they arranged to meet at a public library with Captain Reynolds and Colonel Whitaker, now recovered enough to attend, present as witnesses. Miranda arrived looking markedly different from her previous appearances, her professional polish replaced by visible stress, her confident demeanor now uncertain. After awkward preliminaries, she came directly to the point. "I've been instructed to offer you a significant settlement," she stated flatly. $1 million tax-free through a confidential agreement. In exchange, you sign an NDA covering the incident and all related matters. The company acknowledges no wrongdoing and everyone moves on. "Who sent you?" Jasmine asked simply. "The board authorized Victoria to resolve this by any means necessary," Miranda replied, her rehearsed script faltering slightly. "Stock price has dropped 8% since that recording leaked. Major shareholders are demanding resolution before quarterly earnings call next week." "And if I refuse?" Miranda shifted uncomfortably. "I was told to remind you that Global Air's parent company has interests in defense contracting, media, financial, services, and numerous other sectors. They can make life difficult in ways you haven't even considered." When Jasmine didn't immediately respond, Miranda added with unexpected candor, "For what it's worth, they're doing the same to me. I'm on administrative leave, while they decide whether I'm more valuable as a scapegoat or an ally. 22 years with the company, and suddenly I'm expendable because I followed the training they provided." The admission revealed cracks in the previously unified corporate front. Jasmine recognized an opportunity, not just for personal vindication, but for exposing the larger system. The training that taught you to identify passengers who don't belong in first class based on appearance rather than tickets? Miranda's momentary silence confirmed the accuracy of Jasmine's assessment. "It was never officially written down that way," she finally responded. "But the message was clear in how they evaluated our performance, which passengers they considered problems, whose complaints were taken seriously, and whose were dismissed." Captain Reynolds activated the recorder on his phone, placing it visibly on the table. "Ms. Evans, would you be willing to explain exactly how flight attendants were trained to maintain the premium cabin environment?" Miranda stared at the device, visibly calculating her options. Her loyalty to the company that now viewed her as disposable clearly warred with self-preservation instincts. After several tense moments, she made her decision. "I was taught to protect our traditional premium customers from disruptive elements," she began hesitantly. "We were evaluated partly on demographic consistency in premium cabins. Those terms were never explicitly defined, but the practical application was clear through performance reviews and supervisor feedback. For the next 40 minutes, Miranda detailed systems of implicit bias reinforced through corporate rewards and punishments. Flight attendants who maintained appropriate cabin atmosphere received preferential schedules and routes. Those who failed to manage passenger dynamics effectively faced reduced hours and less desirable assignments. "I'm not proud of my behavior," Miranda concluded, her earlier hostility replaced by something approaching remorse. "But I need you to understand it wasn't just me. It was what we were trained to do, what we were rewarded for doing, what the company wanted while maintaining plausible deniability." The testimony provided crucial context connecting individual discrimination to institutional practices. When Miranda left, visibly shaken by her own admissions, Captain Reynolds turned to Jasmine with renewed determination. "This changes our approach entirely," he declared. "This isn't just about seeking redress for one incident. It's about exposing systematic discrimination disguised as service protocols and premium experience management." Their strategy evolved accordingly. Rather than pursuing only individual accountability for Miranda, or even Global Air executives, they expanded their focus to address the corporate systems and industry practices that enabled and incentivized discrimination while maintaining plausible deniability. This broader approach attracted powerful allies. Civil rights organizations recognized the case's potential to challenge discrimination in commercial services beyond just aviation. Veterans groups saw an opportunity to address mistreatment affecting service members of color across multiple sectors. Legal advocacy organizations identified potential for precedent-setting litigation that could require corporations to examine implicit bias in customer service protocols. The coalition's strengthening position triggered increasingly desperate corporate countermeasures. Global Air's stock continued falling as investor concerns grew about potential regulatory investigations and consumer boycotts. An emergency board meeting convened to address the escalating crisis. "They're panicking," reported their internal source within the company. "The CEO is facing serious pressure from major shareholders concerned about both financial and reputational damage. Some board members are advocating settling at any cost, while others argue for more aggressive counter-strategies." Those counter-strategies soon emerged. Global Air filed a defamation lawsuit against Jasmine, claiming her statements had caused irreparable harm to the company's reputation through false and malicious allegations. The legal action, clearly designed to intimidate rather than prevail in court, demanded $20 million in damages. Simultaneously, military superiors informed Jasmine that her temporary reassignment to Alaska had been upgraded to a permanent 3-year posting, effective immediately, with a thinly veiled suggestion that accepting this career opportunity might positively influence her pending promotion review. Victoria Slater orchestrated a sophisticated media campaign portraying Jasmine as an opportunist who had manufactured controversy for personal gain. Carefully placed stories suggested the incident had been staged to create viral content, with anonymous aviation experts questioning whether physical contact in the confined cabin space could possibly have been deliberate as claimed. Colonel Whitaker discovered his military pension suddenly under routine audit, requiring extensive documentation and creating financial uncertainty at a vulnerable time. Tyler Freeman found himself effectively blacklisted in his industry, with multiple promising job opportunities mysteriously evaporating after initial interest. Captain Reynolds faced perhaps the most direct professional threat when a formal bar complaint appeared, questioning his ethics in soliciting clients for self-aggrandizement and pursuing frivolous claims against corporate entities. The complaint's language and format bore striking similarities to other legal actions initiated by firms representing Global Air. The coordinated pressure campaign represented a final desperate attempt to silence not just Jasmine, but anyone associated with challenging the discriminatory system. However, the escalating tactics produced unintended consequences, drawing increased scrutiny from journalists, activists, and government officials previously hesitant to engage. A congressional representative with oversight responsibility for military affairs publicly questioned whether corporate interests were improperly influencing military personnel decisions. Independent journalists published detailed analyses of connections between Global Air's parent company and defense contractors, raising concerns about conflicts of interest affecting Pentagon operations. As these various threads converged, Jasmine discovered through secure channels that a high-ranking Pentagon official had directly contacted Global Air executives, promising to handle the Washington situation in exchange for consideration regarding post-retirement corporate board positions. This explicit corruption of military authority for corporate benefit transformed what had begun as individual discrimination into a matter of institutional integrity and potential criminal misconduct. When Captain Reynolds attempted to report this evidence to appropriate authorities, he discovered that the Pentagon's internal affairs investigation had been abruptly closed without findings, classified as lacking substantive basis for further inquiry. The institutional blockade seemed complete, with systems designed to ensure accountability instead protecting those who undermined the very principles they claimed to uphold. With traditional recourse channels effectively closed, Jasmine faced the most difficult decision of her career. A secure message arrived from General Brooks, now isolated in his Alaska posting. Washington, they're closing ranks completely. You have 24 hours to accept settlement terms or face dishonorable discharge proceedings based on manufactured security protocol violations. I've never seen pressure like this from highest levels. For the first time since the ordeal began, Jasmine experienced genuine doubt about continuing the fight. The coordinated power aligned against her now extended beyond one corporation to encompass military leadership, political connections, and media influence. The personal cost had escalated from career disruption to potential criminal charges based on fabricated evidence. That night, alone in her temporary quarters, she found herself remembering her father's final days. Clarence Washington had served honorably in Vietnam, only to return to a country that often refused him service at restaurants and hotels while still in uniform. The uniform should mean something, he'd told teenage Jasmine, not just to those wearing it, but to the country it represents. On his deathbed, she'd made a promise that had shaped her military career. "I'll make sure it means something, Dad, for all of us who wear it." That commitment had carried her through combat zones and Pentagon politics alike, a North Star guiding decisions in complex ethical terrain. Now, facing institutional betrayal of unprecedented scope, Jasmine made her decision. If traditional channels of accountability had been compromised, the only remaining option was public transparency that couldn't be contained or controlled. "We're holding a press conference," she informed Captain Reynolds the next morning. "Full disclosure of everything. The original discrimination, the corporate cover-up, the military's complicity, all of it. If they want to destroy my career for telling truth, let them do it in the full light of public scrutiny." The decision represented enormous personal risk, potentially sacrificing everything she'd worked for throughout her military career. Yet it also offered the only remaining path to the accountability that had motivated her stand from the beginning. As they began preparations for this high-stakes public revelation, Jasmine received one final threatening message, delivered through official channels with unmistakable subtext. "Major Washington, this is your final opportunity to accept resolution terms before irreversible actions commence." Her response was simple and direct. "I've faced enemy fire defending American principles. I won't abandon those principles now to protect systems that betray them." That night, in a final act of intimidation, Jasmine's apartment mysteriously caught fire, destroying her remaining personal possessions and nearly claiming her life. Only the coincidental presence of a security detail arranged by supportive veterans prevented tragedy. The message was unmistakable. Power threatened by accountability would stop at nothing to maintain its position. But for Jasmine Washington, who had risked her life in combat defending American ideals, the escalation only strengthened her resolve to expose systems that betrayed those same ideals on American soil. As dawn broke on the day of the scheduled press conference, Jasmine prepared to take her stand not just for personal vindication, but for principles that transcended any single incident or individual. Whatever the outcome, truth would finally have its moment in unfiltered light. The morning of the press conference dawned with ominous new developments. Jasmine's phone chimed with an urgent message from Captain Reynolds. "Check your email. Global Air filed federal lawsuit at 6 a.m., seeking immediate injunction against public statements." The lawsuit, clearly prepared in advance and filed strategically for maximum pressure, alleged defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and violation of confidentiality agreements. The complaint sought not just monetary damages, but an emergency gag order preventing Jasmine from making any public statements regarding the airline or the incident. "This is legally dubious, but tactically brilliant," Captain Reynolds explained during their emergency strategy call. "They don't expect to win long-term, but they might get a temporary restraining order that would block today's press conference. Even if denied, responding requires immediate legal resources we don't have readily available." Before they could formulate a response, Jasmine received an official military communication. Major Washington is directed to report immediately to Fort Wainwright, Alaska for reassignment. Failure to comply with direct orders will result in disciplinary action under Article 92, UCMJ, transportation arranged departing 1400 hours today. The timing was not coincidental. The mandatory departure would occur precisely when their press conference was scheduled, effectively preventing Jasmine's participation without technically ordering her not to speak. "They're getting desperate," Colonel Whitaker observed when informed of these developments. "Using military authority to shield corporate misconduct crosses lines that should alarm every service member and civilian alike." The coordinated pressure campaign continued escalating. Victoria Slater orchestrated a carefully timed media narrative suggesting the entire controversy stemmed from Jasmine's ambition rather than actual discrimination. Several outlets simultaneously published nearly identical stories characterizing the incident as a publicity stunt designed to generate social media attention. "Major Washington has a history of self-promotion," claimed an anonymous military source quoted in these articles. "This incident conveniently occurred just before her promotion board and has all the hallmarks of calculated controversy." Meanwhile, Colonel Whitaker discovered that his military pension had been unexpectedly suspended, pending administrative review of service record discrepancies. The financial pressure came at the worst possible moment, with his recent medical bills creating significant strain. Tyler Freeman's situation deteriorated further when potential employers received anonymous emails warning about his involvement in frivolous litigation and corporate defamation campaigns. Despite his impressive qualifications, every job opportunity mysteriously evaporated after initial expressions of interest. Most alarming was the direct threat to Captain Reynolds' legal career. The bar complaint against him was expedited through normally slow bureaucratic channels, resulting in an emergency hearing scheduled to consider his possible suspension from practice pending investigation. "They're systematically attacking everyone who supports you," Reynolds explained grimly. "Creating maximum pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. This is beyond normal corporate damage control. This is scorched earth retaliation designed to make an example of anyone who challenges the system." As these coordinated attacks unfolded, Jasmine received a secure message from their inside source at the Pentagon. "Evidence tampering traced to General Mitchell's office. Your service records altered to create disciplinary pretext. Multiple NECRI. Regulations violated. High-level conspiracy confirmed." The revelation that military leadership would falsify official records to silence discrimination claims represented a moral line crossing with profound implications. If verified, such actions wouldn't merely constitute administrative misconduct, but potentially criminal conspiracy, violating both military regulations and federal law. Jasmine immediately requested secure preservation of her unaltered service records through multiple channels, but responses were suspiciously delayed or deflected. "System access temporarily limited due to scheduled maintenance," claimed one automated reply. "Request requires additional verification currently processing," stated another. The systematic obstruction confirmed what they now recognized as a coordinated attempt to create a false narrative justifying severe disciplinary action. By altering service records to manufacture prior incidents, military authorities could claim any punishment stemmed from pattern behavior rather than retaliation for exposing discrimination. With traditional accountability systems compromised, at the highest levels, Jasmine faced a devastating choice: surrender to injustice or risk not just her career, but potentially her freedom if manufactured charges led to military prosecution. The ultimatum arrived through official channels that afternoon. Major Washington is offered administrative separation with honorable discharge in lieu of pending disciplinary proceedings. Acceptance requires comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, covering all aspects of military service and civilian interactions with Global Air. Decision required within 24 hours. Captain Reynolds analyzed the document with growing alarm. This NDA is the most restrictive I've ever seen. It would permanently prohibit you from discussing not just the flight incident, but essentially your entire military experience. Violations would trigger both civil and criminal penalties. The coordinated pressure had created Jasmine's darkest moment of crisis. Everything she had worked for, her military career, her reputation, her financial security, hung in the balance. The institutions she had trusted and served had revealed themselves willing to compromise fundamental integrity to maintain systems of power and privilege. That evening, alone in her temporary quarters surrounded by the few possessions that hadn't been destroyed in the apartment fire, Jasmine experienced profound doubt. Was continuing this fight worth the devastating personal cost? Was she being selfish by refusing compromise when others supporting her were suffering significant consequences? Her phone rang with an unknown number. Answering cautiously, she was surprised to hear her father's old Army buddy, a man she hadn't spoken with in years. "Jazzy, your father made me promise something before he passed," the gruff voice began without preamble. He said, "If my daughter ever faces what I faced, remind her of Quang Tri." The reference immediately transported Jasmine to childhood bedtime stories. During the Vietnam War, her father's unit had been ordered to abandon a village they had promised to protect. Rather than following unjust orders that would have condemned civilians to certain death, he had organized a desperate defense until reinforcements arrived, risking court-martial, but saving dozens of lives. He told me, if the day ever came, when you had to choose between comfortable wrong and costly right, you'd know what to do, the old soldier continued. Said you were stronger than him in all the ways that matter. The conversation provided the clarity Jasmine needed. Her father had faced similar institutional pressure to abandon principle for convenience, to accept comfortable injustice rather than costly integrity. His moral courage in that moment had defined his character more profoundly than any medal or promotion ever could. "Thank you for reminding me," Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Please tell me, did he ever regret his choice?" "Not once," came the immediate reply. He said it was the only time he felt truly worthy of the uniform. After ending the call, Jasmine made her decision. The press conference would proceed as planned, regardless of potential consequences. If systems designed to ensure accountability had been corrupted to protect discrimination, then transparency became not just a tactic, but a moral imperative. She drafted her response to the military ultimatum. "I respectfully decline administrative separation. The non-disclosure agreement violates my oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I will fulfill my duty to that oath regardless of personal consequences." The decision made, Jasmine felt unexpected peace despite the gathering storm. By choosing integrity over self-protection, she reclaimed agency in a situation designed to leave her powerless. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same courage that had carried her through combat zones. As dawn broke on the morning of the press conference, Jasmine prepared for what might be her final act as a military officer. She carefully pressed her dress uniform, ensuring every medal and insignia sat perfectly aligned, the physical embodiment of principles now being tested in ways no battlefield had ever demanded. Captain Reynolds arrived early, his face showing the strain of recent days, but his determination undiminished. "They've denied the temporary restraining order," he reported. "A small victory in their ongoing battle. But the military transport to Alaska is still scheduled. If you miss that flight, they'll have grounds for insubordination charges." "I understand the consequences," Jasmine replied calmly. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every service member who might face similar treatment. Some principles are worth the sacrifice." As they prepared to leave for the press conference, Jasmine received one final message from General Brooks. "Washington, I've done everything possible through official channels. They won't budge. Whatever you decide, know that many of us in uniform Stand with you in spirit, even if we can't do so publicly. Godspeed. The message confirmed what she had increasingly suspected. The corruption wasn't universal, but those who maintained integrity within the system often found themselves as constrained as those they wished to support. True change would require forcing light into carefully maintained shadows, regardless of personal cost. With that knowledge firming her resolve, Jasmine straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever consequences awaited her principled stand against discrimination that powerful interests had invested so much in concealing. The National Press Club buzzed with unusual energy that morning. Word had spread about Major Jasmine Washington's scheduled appearance, despite extraordinary efforts to prevent it. Journalists from across the political spectrum filled the main room, drawn by rumors of high-level military corruption and corporate collusion. Security was heightened after anonymous threats targeted the venue, with additional personnel stationed at all entrances. When Jasmine arrived in full-dress uniform, her appearance triggered immediate murmurs through the assembled press corps. The medals across her chest spoke to battlefield courage, but it was her composed determination facing institutional betrayal that commanded the room's respect. "I didn't expect this many people," she whispered to Captain Reynolds as they approached the podium. "This isn't just media," he replied quietly. "Look carefully." Scanning the crowd, Jasmine noticed dozens of military personnel in civilian clothes, scattered throughout the audience. Their presence, risking potential career consequences simply by attending, provided silent but powerful solidarity. More surprising was the crowd outside the building, visible through the lobby windows. Hundreds of supporters had gathered spontaneously, many veterans in partial uniform, others carrying signs with messages like, "Stand with Major Washington," and "Dignity is non-negotiable." As cameras activated and the room quieted, Jasmine stepped to the microphone with the same steady composure that had carried her through battlefield chaos. "Good morning. I am Major Jasmine Washington, United States Army. I appear before you today not as a representative of the military, but as an American citizen exercising my constitutional right to speak truth about matters of public concern." She proceeded to detail the original discrimination incident with clinical precision, then methodically outlined the extraordinary retribution campaign that followed. Her account included specific names, dates, and actions, providing irrefutable documentation of coordinated efforts to silence legitimate discrimination claims through intimidation, career threats, and procedural manipulation. "The issue before us transcends one flight attendant's actions, or even one airline's practices," she explained. "It reveals systems designed to protect discrimination while maintaining plausible deniability. When powerful interests can coordinate across corporate, military, and political boundaries to conceal misconduct, every American's rights are threatened, regardless of their background." The press conference had proceeded for nearly 20 minutes, when security personnel at the rear entrance suddenly moved to intercept an unscheduled arrival. Miranda Evans, the flight attendant whose actions had triggered the entire controversy, pushed past them toward the podium. "I need to speak," she insisted, her voice carrying through the momentarily silent room. Captain Reynolds moved protectively toward Jasmine, but she signaled him to wait. "Let her approach." Miranda looked markedly different from either her polished, professional appearance on the flight or her rehearsed victim persona from media interviews. Her face showed the strain of someone breaking under conflicting pressures. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began hesitantly, after reaching the microphone. "I was paid to stay away, but I can't live with this anymore." What followed was an extraordinary public confession. Miranda detailed how Global Air systematically trained flight attendants to identify passengers who didn't belong in premium cabins based on appearance, rather than tickets. She described performance evaluations that rewarded maintaining demographic consistency and penalized those who failed to manage cabin atmosphere appropriately. "Major Washington didn't do anything wrong," Miranda admitted, emotion cracking her carefully maintained facade. "I pushed her. I said those things. I treated her differently than other passengers because that's what our unwritten policies encouraged. The company knew exactly what happened because it's what they trained us to do while maintaining plausible deniability." Her public admission demolished months of corporate narrative manipulation in minutes. As Miranda continued revealing internal practices that effectively institutionalize discrimination, security personnel approached the podium again, this time escorting Victoria Slater, who appeared both furious and panicked. "This conference must end immediately," Victoria announced, attempting to project authority despite her obvious distress. "Ms. Evans is violating legally binding confidentiality agreements. This entire proceeding constitutes tortious interference with business relationships." The room erupted in reaction, journalists shouting questions as security attempted to maintain order. Victoria seized a nearby microphone, trying to regain narrative control. Global Air has consistently demonstrated commitment to diversity and inclusion. These allegations represent isolated misunderstandings rather than systematic issues. We remain dedicated to resolving all concerns through appropriate channels rather than publicity-seeking spectacles. Her corporate damage control language, so effective in controlled environments, fell flat amid Miranda's raw authenticity and Jasmine's documented evidence. When security attempted to remove Miranda at Victoria's insistence, several military personnel in civilian clothes moved to prevent it, creating a momentary standoff that photographers captured from every angle. "Let her speak," someone called from the crowd, triggering a ripple of similar demands. The tension broke when an unexpected announcement came over the press club's audio system. "Attention all attendees. We have just received confirmation that the Pentagon has announced a comprehensive investigation into allegations of improper influence regarding military personnel policies. Secretary of Defense Marshall has appointed an independent review panel with full subpoena authority." The statement triggered immediate reaction, journalists turning to their devices to confirm the breaking news. Victoria's expression revealed the seismic shift occurring within power corridors. Damage control was failing as accountability mechanisms finally engaged. As Victoria was escorted from the podium after attempting to interrupt proceedings multiple times, Jasmine reclaimed the microphone with dignified authority. "What you're witnessing today isn't just about one incident or even one industry. It's about whether America's institutions will uphold their stated principles or sacrifice them for expedience and profit. It's about whether wearing a uniform grants equal respect regardless of the skin color of the person wearing it." The press conference continued for another hour, with Jasmine methodically presenting evidence of systemic discrimination and institutional retaliation. When formal questioning began, journalists explored connections between military leadership decisions and corporate interests that raised profound concerns about integrity within both sectors. The impact extended far beyond that single room. The press conference, live-streamed across multiple platforms, shattered viewership records as millions watched institutional corruption exposed in real time. Hashtags supporting Jasmine dominated social media, with veterans particularly vocal in their outrage at military leadership's failure to stand against discrimination. Congressional leaders announced emergency hearings into both the airlines, discriminatory practices, and potential corruption within Pentagon decision-making. Global Air's stock plummeted as investor confidence collapsed amid escalating scandal. By afternoon, the company's board had called an emergency session to address the crisis. For Miranda, the personal and professional consequences of her confession remained uncertain. As she left the press conference, reporters swarmed with questions about her future. "I don't know what happens to me now," she admitted with unexpected candor. "But I couldn't keep pretending this was about one misunderstanding when it's really about systems designed to discriminate while denying that's what they're doing." The airline's response came swiftly as damage control efforts shifted from denial to distancing. By evening, Global Air announced the CEO's resignation to facilitate new leadership during this important transition period. The board issued a statement pledging comprehensive review of all customer service protocols and announcing immediate diversity initiatives, including independent oversight of employee training and evaluation. Miranda entered a rehabilitation program focused on prejudice counseling and bias recognition, her public statement expressing genuine remorse while acknowledging systemic factors that had shaped her behavior. "I'm not excusing what I did," she stated, "but recognizing how corporate systems encouraged and rewarded those actions while maintaining plausible deniability." Tyler Freeman received multiple job offers from competing airlines seeking to distinguish themselves through genuine commitment to equitable customer service. His new position as ethics consultant specialized in identifying and addressing implicit bias in corporate protocols, transforming his personal ordeal into institutional improvement. Colonel Whitaker's recovery from his stress-induced heart attack became symbolic of the resilience required to challenge entrenched discrimination. From his hospital bed, he continued coordinating veteran support networks, creating sustainable advocacy systems that would continue regardless of individual leadership. For Jasmine, the aftermath brought both vindication and new purpose. The military investigation that had initially threatened her career evolved into a comprehensive review of how discrimination claims were handled within the armed forces. Her previously delayed promotion proceeded with full recognition of her combat service, the ceremony conducted with the public dignity initially denied. Most significantly, Jasmine received an unexpected appointment to lead a new Pentagon task force addressing discrimination affecting military personnel. The position recognized that her principled stand represented the highest ideals of military service, transforming potential career destruction into an opportunity to create lasting institutional change. 3 months after the press conference that had exposed systematic discrimination and institutional corruption, Jasmine found herself boarding another flight. The irony wasn't lost on her as she approached the first-class cabin, military uniform again impeccable, medals reflecting her service and sacrifice. The flight attendant at the cabin entrance, a young woman with a warm smile, noticed Jasmine's approach. Rather than questioning her presence or examining her ticket with suspicion, she straightened respectfully and offered a crisp, proper salute. "Major Washington," she said with genuine admiration. "It's an honor to have you aboard." The simple gesture, acknowledging both rank and personhood with equal respect, represented the fundamental dignity that had been denied in that original encounter. It confirmed that sometimes, standing firm against injustice created ripples, extending far beyond any single incident or individual. As Jasmine settled into her seat, another passenger recognized her. "You're the officer who stood up to that airline, aren't you? My daughter's in the Army. What you did matters to her future." Jasmine nodded with modest acknowledgement, understanding that her individual stand had become part of something larger. The systems enabling discrimination hadn't been completely dismantled. Such deep institutional change required sustained effort across generations. But critical cracks had formed in previously impenetrable barriers, allowing light into spaces long protected from scrutiny. The true victory wasn't just in her personal vindication or even the specific policy changes that followed. It lay in demonstrating that powerful systems designed to protect discrimination could indeed be challenged successfully when enough people refused to accept comfortable injustice over costly integrity. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jasmine reflected on her father's legacy and the promise she'd made at his grave. The uniform she wore had truly meant something, not just to her, but to countless others who would face similar challenges with one crucial difference. They would know that standing firm against discrimination, even at personal cost, could actually change seemingly immovable systems. Her phone chimed with a final message before airplane mode. Colonel Whitaker sharing news of 20 new discrimination claims filed by service members previously too intimidated to come forward. "Your stand gave them courage," he wrote. "Some battles change more than just the immediate field." As the aircraft lifted into clear skies, Jasmine Washington understood that some victories couldn't be quantified by medals or measured in rank promotions. They existed in the invisible strengthening of moral courage throughout institutions that once seemed impervious to change, proving that sometimes one person standing firmly for principle could indeed bend the arc of justice in meaningful ways. Major Jasmine Washington's ordeal teaches us that standing against discrimination requires extraordinary courage, especially when facing powerful systems designed to protect themselves rather than serve justice. Her story reminds us that discrimination doesn't just occur in obvious forms, but often hides within policies and protocols that disproportionately impact minorities while maintaining plausible deniability. The most important lesson is that institutional change rarely comes from working silently within broken systems. It requires brave individuals willing to risk personal comfort for principles larger than themselves. We learn that powerful entities will go to extraordinary lengths to silence those who challenge their practices, attacking not just the individual, but everyone who supports them. Yet we also see how courage inspires others to find their own strength. When Colonel Whitaker, Tyler Freeman, and Captain Reynolds stood beside Jasmine despite personal consequences, they demonstrated that collective moral courage can withstand even coordinated institutional pressure. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that the uniforms, flags, and symbols we respect mean nothing without the principles they're supposed to represent. When institutions betray their stated values to protect power and privilege, honoring those symbols requires challenging the very institutions that claim to embody them. True patriotism sometimes means holding America accountable to its highest ideals, not accepting comfortable lies that preserve systemic injustice. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and struggled with whether to speak up? Comment below sharing a time when you stood up against unfairness or what held you back from doing so. If Major Washington's courage inspired you, hit that like button to show support for those fighting against racism in all its forms. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that mainstream media often overlooks, and share this video with someone who needs to understand the real-world impact of discrimination. Thank you for listening to this important story. May we all find the courage to stand for what's right, even when it costs us something.